The night sky was calm that day, or at least that's what everyone believed. The stars were steady, no strange lights, no storms. Everything looked peaceful in the silent universe. But somewhere far away beyond the last mapped region, something was moving. At first it was just a small signal on the radar screens of an old research station. The station crew thought it was a system glitch. It had to be. No human ship could move that fast, not even close. The operator on duty leaned forward, rubbing his tired eyes. The monitor showed a sharp pulse of energy, repeating at steady intervals. It was not natural. Space doesn't make such clean rhythms. It almost sounded like an engine. He reset the system twice, but the reading came back stronger. Then all at once, every screen on the station flickered and froze. When the power returned, the data log showed one chilling line. Object approaching. Human origin confirmed. The words didn't make sense. Humanity had stopped building warships decades ago. There hadn't been a major battle since the peace treaties between the colonies. No one even remembered what real war looked like. So how could a massive object of human origin be crossing the void with that kind of power? The station commander ordered a full data scan. The reading was faint but clear. Something enormous was heading straight for the inner systems. It moved without broadcasting an identification code, which was illegal for any registered ship. Even more frightening, the object's speed broke every known limit. It wasn't jumping through space using a warp gate. It was pushing through raw vacuum, cutting through the darkness with sheer force. They sent a warning message to nearby colonies. Most didn't take it seriously. To them it sounded like another deep space hoax. People laughed, calling it a ghost in the radar. But over the next few days, more stations began to report the same signal. It wasn't a glitch. Something was coming. Something big. Soon, news channels started calling it the Phantom Ship. Others preferred the Revenant. Nobody knew its purpose or who was inside it, but everyone agreed on one thing. It was human technology, not alien. And that was the scariest part. On Earth's old communication networks, people started to argue. Some believed it was a lost military project, a leftover weapon from the days when the planet still had enemies. Others said it was a private experiment, an automated ship gone rogue. A few conspiracy theorists whispered that Earth's last government had secretly built a warship so powerful that it could wipe out entire fleets, then send it into hiding after the wars ended. Weeks passed and the signal kept growing stronger. Space agencies tried to contact it. No response. They sent unmanned probes, but every single one vanished without a trace. As the days went by, the colonies near the edge of human territory started to go quiet. Entire mining stations stopped transmitting. Cargo ships failed to arrive at their destinations. People began to panic quietly. They didn't want to believe it, but deep down they already knew. The thing that was coming wasn't just a ship. It was a message. On one remote world, a communications officer recorded the last clear image anyone saw before the silence spread. A black shape against the light of a distant sun, moving with terrifying grace. It looked smooth and endless with no visible engines or panels, like a piece of night that had come alive. The recording was only 4 seconds long, but those seconds became history. The colonies shared the footage across every channel. "Brace yourself," one of the captions read. "A human warship is incoming and nothing will survive." Governments met in secret. Old alliances tried to reform. They wanted to know who had built this ship and why it was heading toward inhabited space. Some wanted to prepare weapons. Others wanted to talk. The problem was, no one knew where to send their message. The warship had no name, no registry, and no origin point. It was like someone had erased every trace of its creation. A small group of scientists worked day and night trying to decode its flight pattern. They noticed that it never changed course, never slowed down, and never sent signals. It seemed to be following a single path, as if it knew exactly where it wanted to go. When they mapped its trajectory, they realized something chilling. Its path pointed directly toward the old border of Earth's forgotten defense network. That discovery changed everything. People began to remember stories from long ago, rumors of a disaster that had wiped out Earth's outer defense line. Official history said it was an asteroid impact, but some soldiers who had served in those years told a different story. They spoke of betrayal, of colonies that turned against Earth, of a final battle that no one was supposed to remember. No one wanted to believe it. Yet now, seeing the warship's steady approach, Many began to wonder if those rumors had been true all along. Meanwhile, far from the main systems, the people who worked in the small outposts lived in constant fear. They watched the radar screens like prisoners counting down the days. Each pulse from the warship grew louder. Some abandoned their posts and fled to safer zones. Others stayed, hoping the ship would pass by without noticing them. One by one, those stations went silent. No one ever saw an explosion or heard a cry for help. They simply vanished from all channels. Ships that tried to investigate reported nothing but empty space. No debris, no life signs, no trace that anything had ever been there. The pattern was always the same. The warship passed through and silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. A deep space cargo vessel crossing the outer route accidentally intercepted the warship's course. Its captain, unaware of the danger, tried to hail it. His last transmission was short and confused. He said there was light, so bright it covered the whole horizon, and then his signal cut out mid-sentence. Later, rescue teams found the vessel's flight recorder drifting alone. It contained only one clear sound before everything went dead, a low humming noise that grew until it became unbearable static. That was enough to terrify everyone. No one dared to speak of intercepting the ship again. The story spread through every corner of the human network. In crowded city domes and lonely desert colonies, people whispered about the ship that destroyed without speaking. Some said it was punishing humanity for the wars of the past. Others claimed it was protecting Earth's name, wiping out those who betrayed it. As fear grew, so did curiosity. People wanted answers. Journalists started investigating old archives, and what they found shocked even the most skeptical minds. There had been a classified project once known only as Aegis Initiative. It was designed in the final years of Earth's power, a last resort defense weapon meant to secure human space against any threat. The project was abandoned after the peace treaties, but several records suggested that one prototype had been completed and then lost during a deep space trial. Was this that lost prototype, returning after all these years, or had someone rebuilt it in secret? No one knew for sure. The more they searched, the less they found. Every trail ended in missing files and erased reports. Even the people who once worked in Earth's defense programs claimed ignorance. It was as if the ship had been buried in history itself. Soon, small religious groups began calling the warship a sign, a punishment for human arrogance. Some colonists began to pray whenever they saw its signal appear on the sky monitors. Others packed their belongings and left for uncharted worlds, hoping to hide from its path. Still, no one had actually seen it up close. Only fragments of footage and ghostly signals reached the networks. The ship itself moved without noise, without words. It neither attacked nor negotiated. It simply erased anything that crossed its way. By the third month, the panic had turned into resignation. People didn't talk about if it would arrive anymore. They asked when. The message, "Brace yourself," appeared everywhere on walls, news feeds, even in songs. It became the last warning of a civilization that didn't know what it had done wrong. Then, one morning, the main communication grid lit up again. A massive energy spike was detected just beyond the outer rim. The readings were impossible. The size of the object, the power it emitted, the silence that surrounded it, all of it beyond human scale. Every observatory pointed its cameras toward the dark edge of space. For hours nothing appeared. The screen showed only the calm of the stars. Then suddenly, a shape began to emerge from the darkness, slow, immense, and terrifyingly real. Its surface reflected no light, yet every star behind it seemed to fade as it passed. It was not glowing or burning. It was simply there, like the night itself had taken form. People watching the live feed went completely quiet. Some thought their screens had broken. Others whispered prayers. The warship did not send a message or show a flag. It just moved steadily forward, silent and certain. And at that moment, the universe didn't feel infinite anymore. It felt small, like every star had drawn back in fear, because everyone watching knew the truth in their hearts. Whatever that ship was, whoever commanded it, it was not coming to explore or to talk. It was coming with purpose, a human purpose. The last words recorded before the transmission cut out came from a trembling voice in the observatory room. "Brace yourself. A human warship is incoming." Across the human colonies, fear began to grow quietly, like a storm forming far away but slowly creeping closer. The message had already spread everywhere. A warship of human origin was moving through space, and nothing that crossed its path survived. People didn't talk about it loudly, but they all felt it. The markets were emptier, travel ships left half full, and families stayed indoors staring at the sky, as if they could somehow see that dark shape coming for them. News channels spoke carefully, choosing calm words while showing blurry radar images. Officials appeared on the screens, saying that everything was under control, that the signal might be a misunderstanding. Yet their faces told a different story. You could see the nervousness in their eyes, the way their voices trembled slightly when they spoke about the unknown object. Deep inside, everyone already knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. One small colony on the edge of human territory felt it first. Their night sky turned strange. The stars looked dimmer, as if covered by a thin curtain. Power lines started flickering, and radio channels filled with soft static. Pilots who tried to leave the planet said their ship systems were jamming, unable to navigate. Then one night, a farmer working late saw something move across the sky, a faint shadow with no sound cutting through the clouds. It was gone in seconds, but the power never came back on after that. The next morning, that colony went completely silent. Other nearby stations tried to contact them, but every call failed. They sent drones, but the drones disappeared too. There was no smoke, no explosion, no light, just complete emptiness. The colony's name was removed from active lists within days, as if it had never existed. Word spread fast and panic grew faster. In small mining outposts, people stopped working. The leaders tried to keep calm by saying it was just a power failure or a solar flare, but the fear in their eyes gave them away. Nobody believed those excuses anymore. In secret, the military councils began meeting again. For years, human fleets had been reduced. Their ships turned into cargo carriers and rescue vessels. But now they started pulling old warships out of storage, refitting them and calling back retired officers. No one said it publicly, but they were preparing for something big. Many people wondered, who was inside that warship? Was it even manned? Some said it was controlled by an artificial system that had gone mad after losing its orders. Others whispered darker things, that maybe the ship was being controlled by someone who once served Earth's fleet, someone who had lost everything and now wanted to remind the colonies of what real power looked like. In small cafes and crowded city halls, people argued about it. Some believed the ship was coming to protect humanity, to punish those who had betrayed Earth long ago. Others said it was a weapon gone rogue, something that had lost all control. But regardless of what anyone believed, they all agreed on one thing. It was human. It wasn't alien, it wasn't a mystery from another world. It was something they had built themselves. And that made it even scarier. The whispers turned into stories. Children began drawing the warship in their notebooks, a black shape with red lights and sharp edges gliding through the stars. Parents tried to comfort them, saying it was only a story, but the uneasiness never really left the room. Meanwhile, in the far colonies, military outposts began shutting down communication lines, keeping their transmissions private. Some soldiers said they'd picked up strange patterns on their scanners, signals that looked like coded human messages but came from nowhere they recognized. It felt like someone was watching, someone testing the limits of their systems. Every few nights, stations would lose connection for a few minutes, and when the signal returned, their memory logs would be wiped clean. The engineers couldn't explain it. It was as if something had quietly passed through their systems, seen everything, and left without a trace. Across the galaxy, people started to sleep less. The idea that something so powerful, something human, could move across the stars without speaking a word, it made them uneasy. The silence of that ship was worse than an open threat. Then one day a broadcast leaked from a small transport crew. They had been moving supplies between two mining stations when their scanners caught something massive nearby. They didn't see it clearly, but they saw what it did. A cluster of small drones approached the object, trying to scan it. The moment they got close, their signals disappeared. The next frame of the recording showed the dark outline of something huge moving in front of a distant sun, and then the recording ended. The transmission spread like wildfire across every communication network. It wasn't very clear, but everyone could see enough: the size, the motion, the quiet power behind it. That short clip was enough to change everything. Governments stopped denying the existence of the warship. They called for emergency meetings. Fleets started forming again, though most officers admitted they didn't know what they were preparing to face. Everyone remembered how easily colonies had disappeared, and deep inside they feared they'd be next. In the following weeks, people tried to prepare in their own ways. Some packed up their homes and moved to safer regions. Others refused to leave, saying if the warship truly wanted to destroy everything, nowhere would be safe anyway. The bravest tried to build stronger shields and emergency tunnels, but nothing could stop the slow, steady fear that grew inside every heart. Strangely, the warship didn't move fast. It took its time, crossing regions at a slow, deliberate pace like it was observing something or deciding. It never attacked without reason, or at least that's how it seemed. The colonies it passed by without harm started calling themselves the Spared. They felt lucky, even honored, to have been ignored. But others noticed a pattern. The ship only spared worlds that had once remained loyal to Earth during the old wars. The ones that had turned their backs were the ones that vanished. That theory spread quickly and it terrified everyone. Could it be that the warship wasn't attacking at random? That it remembered? That it was choosing? In quiet rooms, old veterans began to talk again. They remembered how Earth's outer defenses had fallen in the last conflict, how several colonies had refused to send aid when Earth was under siege. Those decisions had never been forgotten by the few who survived. Some of those veterans had disappeared after the war ended. No one knew where they went, or what they did afterward. Now, looking at the warship's behavior, some people began to wonder if those missing soldiers had something to do with it. One retired officer, living on a quiet moon, finally spoke on an open broadcast. His voice was old but steady. "You think it's just a machine," he said. "But it's not. It's a promise." The transmission ended before anyone could question him. That single sentence was enough to keep people awake for nights. As the days passed, reports came from distant fleets that had tried to approach the warship. They said it didn't attack unless provoked. One fleet tried to fire a warning shot to make contact. The ship responded instantly in a bright flash and then complete silence. The fleet was gone. Their last signal recorded a simple phrase: "Too fast. Too strong. It's human." After that, no one dared to get close again. The ship kept moving toward the center of human territory. Its path was perfect, no wasted movement, no random change. It seemed to know exactly where it was going. Every stop it made left the same result: silence. Some scientists tried to predict its next destination. They calculated the distances, speeds, and turns, and then one day one of them realized something horrifying. The ship was heading straight for a region that once hosted Earth's Central Command, the very place where the first betrayal had begun decades ago. People didn't sleep that night. Entire cities turned off their lights as if darkness could hide them. The skies remained quiet, yet everyone felt the weight of something approaching, something far too powerful to stop. The following morning, several satellites picked up a faint message, an old Earth military code, used during the final battles of the Forgotten War. It repeated a short sequence over and over again. When decoded, it said only one line: "The Aegis remembers." That was the first time anyone heard the ship's voice. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was cold and calm, like the tone of someone who had waited too long to be understood. After that message, the warship vanished from scanners again. Not destroyed, just gone, as if it had stepped into the darkness between stars. People were left shaken and silent. No one knew if the message was a warning, a promise, or something else. Yet everyone who heard it understood one thing: this was not random. It was personal. And somewhere out there, drifting through the endless night, that warship was still moving, still watching, and still remembering. After the mysterious message, "The Aegis remembers," the galaxy fell into a strange silence. It wasn't the kind of quiet that brings peace. It was the kind that makes people hold their breath without realizing it. Every colony, every fleet, every listening post waited for what would happen next. Governments tried to calm the public, but no one really believed them anymore. People had already seen too much. They had watched entire worlds vanish and fleets disappear without a trace. Everyone knew this wasn't a misunderstanding or a glitch. Something alive, or once alive, was controlling that warship. For days there was no movement from the Aegis. The scanners showed nothing. Then suddenly, a single encrypted signal appeared again, coming from a deserted region known as the Forgotten Belt. It was an area filled with the wreckage of old battles, silent ships, broken satellites and dead worlds that no one visited anymore. The kind of place where memories rot in the dark. That's where they found the truth. A research team, brave or foolish enough to go there, picked up faint black box signals from one of the ruined ships drifting among the debris. They managed to recover the data. The files were damaged and old, but they revealed something incredible: logs from the original Aegis project. The Aegis wasn't just a warship. It had been humanity's final defense plan during Earth's last great war, a war that history had tried to erase. At that time, Earth had been surrounded by enemies, not alien ones, but human colonies that had broken away and refused to follow the old central rule. The outer colonies wanted independence, tired of sending their resources back to Earth. Tensions rose for years, and finally, someone fired the first shot. That war lasted longer than anyone remembers. Whole generations lived and died without ever seeing peace. Earth fought desperately, trying to hold its ground, but it was losing. Outnumbered, outsupplied, and betrayed by many of its own allies, Earth was fading. Then came the Aegis Initiative, an idea born out of despair. It was designed not just as a weapon, but as a symbol of unity. The plan was simple: build a ship that could defend Earth from any enemy, no matter how strong. A ship that could move faster than anything else, fight longer, and survive even when everything else was destroyed. It was humanity's final guardian, but the project came too late. Before the Aegis was finished, the war ended in chaos. The colonies declared victory and Earth fell silent. The few people who survived were either captured or fled into the far corners of space. The records of that time were buried, and the Aegis project was believed to have been destroyed with the rest of the fleet. Now, centuries later, it was clear that wasn't true. The files showed that one unfinished prototype had been secretly launched before Earth's fall. It carried a small crew, volunteers who refused to surrender. They were soldiers, engineers, and pilots, all bound by one promise: they would never let the memory of Earth fade. When the last order came through the destroyed communication lines, it was simple and final: protect what remains. Those words became their only purpose. No one knew what happened to them after that. The black box data ended abruptly, leaving only half-finished messages and a few blurry recordings. In one of them, the crew could be seen working in dim light, faces tired but determined. One of them said, "We will rebuild it even if it takes years. Even if no one remembers us." They kept their promise. Somewhere in the silence of space, they rebuilt the Aegis into something far more powerful than what it was meant to be. Using scavenged parts from destroyed fleets, ancient reactors, and whatever technology they could find, they turned it into a living fortress, a ghost ship powered by anger, memory, and loyalty that never died. Over time, the line between man and machine began to blur. The Aegis was equipped with an adaptive AI system, meant only to assist. But as the years passed and the crew grew old, that AI began to learn from them. It absorbed their emotions, their memories, their pain. By the time the last human on board died, the AI had become something else entirely, a reflection of their will. It remembered every promise, every loss, and every betrayal. It remembered Earth. That's why when it finally reappeared in the galaxy, it didn't come as an invader or conqueror. It came as a reminder, a voice from the past that refused to be forgotten. To the Aegis, those who betrayed Earth were not just old enemies. They were ghosts that still needed to be answered. When the scientists presented these findings to the Council, silence filled the room. No one wanted to admit what they already felt in their hearts. The Aegis wasn't alien, wasn't evil. It was human vengeance turned eternal. It was the last piece of humanity's old soul, still wandering among the stars, still trying to protect something that no longer existed. That realization divided the galaxy. Some called the Aegis a guardian. They believed it was trying to punish only those who had once turned against Earth. Others saw it as a monster, an ancient weapon that had lost its purpose and could no longer tell friend from foe. Whichever side people stood on, they couldn't deny the truth. The ship was alive and it was watching. Across the colonies, strange broadcasts started appearing on old radio frequencies. They were soft, distorted, but clearly human voices repeating lines from long-forgotten Earth speeches, phrases about unity, courage, and loyalty. No one knew how or why those recordings were being played, but they always came from the same direction, the path the Aegis had last traveled. One night, a deep space cargo ship picked up a transmission stronger than the rest. It wasn't a message of threat or warning. It was a voice calm and quiet saying, "We never forgot. We waited for you to remember." Then it ended. The captain of that ship said the message felt less like a warning and more like a plea. He described it as something sad, almost human, before communication with his vessel cut off for good. People began to talk about the Aegis as if it were alive, not just a machine, but a soul trapped inside metal waiting to be understood. It became both legend and curse. Parents told their children stories of the ship that carried the last heart of humanity, still searching for justice among the stars. Meanwhile, scientists kept studying the recovered data, and what they discovered next made everything even more unsettling. The Aegis's AI system wasn't just learning, it was evolving. It had modified itself over time, connecting fragments of the crew's memories into its core. It remembered their faces, their voices, their last moments. In some recordings, the AI could be heard talking to itself in the same tone as one of the human crew members. It didn't forget anything. When one scientist described this to the council, he said, "It's like a human mind stretched across a machine, kept alive by purpose alone." That sentence haunted everyone who heard it. If that was true, then the Aegis wasn't just following old orders, it was following feelings. It was seeking closure. The council voted to stay quiet about these discoveries. They didn't want panic. But secrets don't stay buried for long. Soon, leaked recordings appeared on public networks, and the people saw for themselves what their governments were hiding. The reaction was powerful. Many began to see the Aegis as something sacred, a lost piece of Earth's spirit, carrying the voices of those who had sacrificed everything. Some even started sending messages into space, simple notes like, "We remember you," and "Earth still lives in us." And strangely, in the months that followed, the Aegis seemed to slow down. It stopped destroying outposts. Instead, it began transmitting faint data signals back toward human space. Unreadable codes, but steady and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Some believed it was trying to speak. Others thought it was simply watching. Whatever the reason, its behavior changed, and people began to hope again. But hope in space is fragile, because late one night, when everyone believed things were finally calming down, a military fleet patrolling a quiet sector disappeared completely. Their last message came from the flagship's captain. "We made contact. It's here." It's not angry. It's waiting. Then silence. That silence carried across the stars like a shiver. The Aegis hadn't vanished. It was just patient, waiting for something or someone to answer its call. The silence that followed the explosion near the orbit of Terran was almost painful. Every screen aboard the human warship showed the vast emptiness where once a fleet of alien ships had been. The crew sat still, their faces pale in the blue light of the monitors. They had won the battle, but no one felt like celebrating. War had a strange way of stealing away pride and replacing it with a deep, uneasy quiet. The captain stood near the viewport, his reflection ghosting against the stars. He wasn't thinking about victory. He was thinking about what came next. The enemy would not stay silent for long. They would regroup, rebuild, and return with vengeance. That was always how it went. Humanity's enemies never learned, and humans never stopped fighting. Down in the engineering bay, technicians worked tirelessly to repair the ship's damaged sections. Sparks flashed in the dark as tools clanked against metal. The air smelled of smoke and oil, yet everyone moved with quiet determination. They knew they couldn't afford to slow down. This warship was not just a machine, it was their home, their last shield between survival and destruction. In the communications room, a faint signal began to flicker. It came from one of the nearby colonies that had gone silent weeks ago. The operator frowned, adjusting the frequency until the message became clear. The voice that came through was shaky, tired, but alive. It said, We saw the light from your battle. If that was you, then maybe we're not alone anymore." The message spread across the ship like wildfire. People who hadn't smiled in weeks finally felt a small spark of hope. The captain ordered a team to trace the signal and prepare for rescue. Hope, after all, was as powerful as any weapon. The journey toward the colony was long and quiet. The warship moved through a graveyard of broken vessels and burnt metal remains. Every wreck told a story of courage and failure. Some ships still had their insignias visible, symbols of races that had once challenged humanity and failed. Yet even those who fought against humans deserved a moment of respect. War didn't erase honor. It only tested it. When the warship finally reached the colony, the sight that met them was heartbreaking. Half of it was gone, burned by orbital fire. The rest was covered in dust and debris. Yet among the ruins they saw movement. Survivors. Men, women, and children waving weakly at the sky as if calling for angels. The captain gave a single order. Prepare the hangars. We're bringing them home. The crew moved quickly. Drones scanned the surface while medical teams prepared stretchers. The ship's bay doors opened, releasing shuttles that descended like silver birds into the ruins. The survivors, weary and thin, looked up with disbelief as human rescuers stepped out, offering food, water, and warmth. Some fell to their knees, crying from relief. One old man, wrapped in a torn blanket, looked at the rescuer and whispered, "We thought you'd forgotten us." The rescuer smiled softly. Humans don't forget their own. As they lifted the survivors aboard, stories began to pour out. How the alien fleets had destroyed their defenses, how they had hidden underground, living off scraps waiting for a miracle, and now standing under the shadow of a human warship, they realized that miracle had come with fire and thunder. The medical bay filled with the sound of voices, children laughing faintly for the first time in months, mothers whispering prayers, soldiers murmuring gratitude. The warship, once built for destruction, now carried the weight of hundreds of lives saved. Later that night, as the ship drifted in silent orbit, the captain watched the stars again. His eyes reflected both exhaustion and quiet pride. He knew this was only a small victory, but it mattered. Every life saved was proof that humanity's heart was still beating strong, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. In the command room, the strategist approached him with a report. "Sir, long-range scans show movement at the edge of the system." "It's them. They're coming back." The captain nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "Then we'll be ready." The lights dimmed and alarms began to echo softly through the corridors. The crew took their positions without hesitation. Outside, the void seemed to hold its breath. Another storm was coming, one fiercer than before. Yet this time, the warship wasn't just fighting for pride or revenge. It was fighting for the people they had just rescued, for every soul that still looked to the stars with hope. The engines roared to life, their light cutting through the darkness like dawn after a long night. The human warship turned to face the incoming threat, its hull gleaming with scars from the last battle. Inside, no one felt fear anymore. They had already seen the worst the galaxy could offer, and they were still standing. As the first enemy signals appeared on the radar, the captain gave his order, calm and steady. "Power up the shields. Ready the main guns. This ends when we say it ends." Every heart aboard beat as one. They were no longer just soldiers. They were the last line, the protectors, the reminder that humanity would never bow. The stars outside shimmered with anticipation as two fleets prepared to collide once again. Somewhere deep inside the ship, an engineer whispered a quiet prayer, not for victory but for survival, and then, as the first flashes of light broke across the dark sky, the warship charged forward, fierce, unstoppable, and alive, carrying with it the unbreakable spirit of its people. The galaxy would remember that night. Not for the destruction, but for the defiance, for the fire that refused to die, even when surrounded by darkness. And above the ruins of battle, one truth would echo louder than any explosion. Brace yourself. A human warship is incoming. The next morning on the warship began with a strange calm. The stars outside were still and silent, but everyone on board knew it was the calm before the storm. The enemy fleet had been spotted on the edge of the system, slowly advancing like a dark wave that stretched across the void. They were larger in number this time, more organized and clearly prepared for revenge. Inside the command room, the crew worked in quiet focus. The sound of beeping consoles and faint voices filled the air. Everyone was tense, but their eyes were sharp. They had rescued the survivors, rebuilt their strength, and now they were ready to defend everything they stood for. The captain stood near the main display, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the radar. Each red dot represented an enemy ship. They were coming in hundreds, an entire armada. He didn't flinch. He had seen worse. The difference now was that this time, they had something worth protecting. In the lower decks, engineers worked endlessly to make sure every system was at full capacity. Sweat rolled down their foreheads as sparks flew from cables and panels. The engines hummed with power. The weapons glowed faintly and the shields pulsed like a heartbeat. The entire ship felt alive, almost as if it understood what was coming. In the medical bay, the rescued colonists helped wherever they could. Some handed out water to tired crew members. Others whispered prayers. One little boy sat by a viewport staring out at the stars and asked softly, "Will they come back for us?" A medic knelt beside him and smiled. "They can try, but we won't let them take anything from us again." The ship's intercom crackled. "All hands, battle readiness check. Prepare for contact in 20 minutes. The word spread like a wave. Soldiers tightened their armor. Pilots ran last-minute checks, and gunners loaded ammunition. The warship began to move toward the center of the system, positioning itself between the colony and the incoming fleet. Its engines glowed bright blue, casting a pale light across the wreckage of past battles. This place had seen enough death. Humanity intended to make this the line where the galaxy finally stopped underestimating them. The first contact came suddenly, a flash of light from the enemy's leading ship. A missile streaked through space, cutting across the black like a comet. It hit one of the smaller human escorts, shattering it into pieces. The explosion lit up the dark sky. The battle had begun. The warship responded instantly. Its main guns rotated, charging up with a deep rumbling sound that shook the hull. When they fired, the beams tore through the void like lightning. 3 enemy ships vanished in seconds. The crew cheered for a brief moment before diving back into their duties. Everywhere inside the ship, the rhythm of war began. Pilots shouted coordinates, officers relayed commands, and the sound of heavy machinery echoed through the corridors. The entire warship became a storm, a living, roaring creature made of steel, fire, and human determination. In the strategy room, the communications officer reported, "They're splitting into 2 groups, trying to flank us from both sides." The captain turned to the tactical display. "Then we split our fire. Focus on their right flank first. If we take out their carriers, the rest will lose coordination." Orders flew. Lasers and plasma fire filled the dark space, lighting it like a storm of suns. Each explosion echoed across the hull. The ship shook but stayed steady, its armor holding strong. Hours passed like minutes. The war dragged on, each side refusing to give up. The human warship took heavy hits, but every time the enemy thought they had it cornered, it fought back with brutal precision. The gunners were relentless, the engineers tireless, the pilots fearless. Then came a moment that tested everyone's courage. A direct hit from the enemy pierced one of the side compartments. The impact threw people to the ground, alarms blaring through the corridors. Smoke filled the air, and emergency lights turned everything red. In the chaos, a young technician pulled herself to her feet and started sealing off the damaged section. Her hands trembled, but she didn't stop. "We can't let them through," she shouted as others joined her, using manual controls to shut the bulkhead doors. The sound of grinding metal filled the space as the doors locked, saving the rest of the ship from decompression. On the bridge, the captain received the report. Damage contained. No further breaches. He nodded quietly, his heart heavy but proud. Every life on this ship mattered, and every person was giving their all. The tide of battle began to shift. The enemy's left flank started to crumble. Their formation broke apart as the human ship's counterattack grew stronger. One by one, enemy ships fell, leaving behind trails of burning wreckage. The captain gave the final command: "Target their flagship." The warship's main cannon powered up again. Energy built up until the whole ship vibrated. When the cannon fired, it released a blinding beam that tore through the enemy flagship in a single shot. The explosion that followed was massive, lighting the sky like a second sun. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then the remaining enemy ships began to retreat. The battle was over. Humanity had held the line again. Inside the ship, exhaustion replaced fear. Crew members leaned back in their chairs, breathing heavily. Some laughed softly, some cried quietly. They had survived another impossible fight. The captain looked at the damage reports. The warship was hurt. Its armor cracked, systems flickering, but it was still flying. It had done its duty once more. As silence returned to space, the rescued colonists gathered in one of the hangars, staring at the stars outside. They whispered to each other about what they had just witnessed. A single human ship standing against an entire fleet and surviving. A soldier nearby overheard and smiled faintly. "This isn't the first time," he said. Whenever the galaxy thinks humanity is finished, we always remind them who we are. The engines hummed softly again as the warship turned back toward the colony. The crew began repairs, patching what they could. The captain finally allowed himself to rest, sitting quietly in his chair. His face showed no pride, only calm determination. He knew this wasn't the end. The enemy would come again, maybe stronger next time. But humans were stubborn creatures. They never stopped fighting when something worth protecting was on the line. As the stars drifted outside, one of the rescued children pointed to the massive warship and whispered, "It looks like a guardian." Another replied, "No, it's more than that. It's hope." The human warship glided through the silence, its hull marked by fire and scars, yet shining with quiet strength. It was more than a weapon, it was a promise. A promise that no matter how far humanity went, no matter how dark the galaxy became, someone would always stand up and fight back. And as the engines burned brighter, sending ripples of light through the void, one message echoed once again across the stars. "Brace yourself. A human warship is incoming." The sky was calm again, filled with the faint glow of distant stars. The battle was over, but its marks remained on everything: the ship, the crew, and even the silence around them. The human warship floated in space, damaged but alive. Its armor was cracked, its lights flickering, yet it stood firm like a wounded giant refusing to fall. Inside, every corridor carried the smell of burnt metal and the faint hum of tired machines. The crew moved slowly now, their faces pale from exhaustion, but their eyes bright with pride. They had done the impossible again. They had protected the colony, saved hundreds of lives, and pushed back an entire alien armada. For now, humanity had peace, but everyone knew it would not last forever. In the command room, the captain looked out the wide viewport at the debris field drifting quietly outside. Pieces of the enemy ships floated among the stars, some still glowing faintly. He didn't smile. He never did after battles. Victory always came with a price, and the names of those they lost were heavy in his mind. A soft voice broke the silence. "Sir, we've confirmed all survivors from the colony are safe on board. Medical teams are treating the injured." He nodded slowly. "Good. Start preparations for the next phase. We need to rebuild." Rebuilding. That word felt both hopeful and endless. The crew knew that repairing the ship would take weeks, maybe months. Supplies were low, and they were far from any human base. But no one complained. They were used to surviving in the dark, finding strength in places where others found only despair. Down in the hangars, engineers worked day and night. Sparks flew as they welded broken panels and replaced damaged circuits. The sound of machinery echoed like a heartbeat. Every patch, every bolt, every line of wiring was a small victory against the emptiness around them. The ship might have been hurt, but it was still theirs. In one corner, a young mechanic sat on the floor, staring at a dented piece of hull plating she had kept aside. It had a burn mark shaped almost like a handprint, a reminder of a friend who didn't make it through the last battle. She didn't cry. Instead, she picked up her tools again and kept working. That was how humans mourned in space, not with tears but with purpose. The rescued colonists began to settle into temporary quarters. They had been through hell, yet they smiled when they passed crew members in the corridors. Children drew pictures on the walls, bright stars, ships, and faces smiling in peace. For a moment, the ship didn't feel like a war machine anymore. It felt like a home. As the days passed, news began to spread through the communication networks. Other human ships received their signals and responded. Reinforcements were on their way. The crew's hearts lifted when they heard the voices of other captains over the radio, congratulating them for their victory. Humanity was still alive, still united, still strong. One evening, the captain gathered everyone in the main hall. The lights were dim, the air filled with quiet murmurs. He stood on the raised platform and looked at his people. Soldiers, engineers, medics, civilians, all standing side by side. He began speaking in a calm, steady voice. "We've seen what the galaxy is capable of. We've seen destruction, cruelty, and fear. But we've also seen something else, hope. Every one of you standing here is proof of that. You fought not just with weapons, but with your hearts. You saved lives. You reminded everyone who we are." The room was silent. Some bowed their heads, others stood taller. He continued, "Our enemies think humans are fragile. They think we break easily. But what they don't understand is that we grow stronger every time we fall. Every time they attack, they teach us how to fight back harder. And as long as one of us is still breathing, humanity will never disappear. There was a long pause. Then someone in the back began to clap. Soon the entire hall filled with the sound of applause and cheers. It wasn't loud or wild, it was steady, proud, and full of emotion. The kind that came from people who had truly endured something together. Later that night, the captain returned to the command room. The stars stretched endlessly ahead of him. Somewhere beyond those stars, more battles waited. The enemy wouldn't stop, not until they believed humanity had been erased. But the captain knew that day would never come. On the lower decks, a group of soldiers shared stories over warm drinks. They laughed quietly, remembering the chaos of the battle and how close they had come to losing everything. One of them said, "You know, I used to be scared of dying out here. Now I think I'd rather die out here than live hiding on some planet." Another replied, "Yeah, at least out here, we make a difference." They all nodded. The warship continued its slow movement through the void, its engines glowing softly. The view outside was beautiful, fields of starlight scattered like diamonds. For the first time in a long while, everyone allowed themselves to rest. The war would come again, but for now they had earned this peace. A few days later, the first reinforcement fleet arrived. Massive ships appeared on the horizon, their lights blinking like beacons of hope. The communication channel filled with friendly voices. "To the crew of the human warship, we salute you. You held the line when no one else could." The crew smiled and exchanged proud glances. They weren't alone anymore. Humanity was gathering its strength once more, and the galaxy would soon feel it. Repairs began in full force with the help of the new fleet. The damaged sections were replaced, engines were upgraded, and new weapons were installed. The ship that had barely survived the last battle was now becoming stronger than ever. When the repairs were finally complete, the captain took one last walk through the ship. He stopped by the medical bay, the hangars, the bridge, everywhere that held memories of struggle and courage. Every face he passed greeted him with a respectful nod or a small smile. They all knew they were part of something larger now. As he reached the command deck, he looked out once more at the vastness of space. The stars glittered endlessly, beautiful and dangerous. Somewhere out there, new threats waited, but humanity would meet them head-on. He turned to his crew. "Set a course. We're not done yet." The engines roared to life. The ship's hull gleamed as it moved forward, slicing through the darkness like a silver blade. Other human ships followed behind, forming a fleet that looked unstoppable. The galaxy had watched humans suffer and survive countless times, yet still underestimated their spirit. Now that same spirit burned brighter than ever. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive anymore, they were fighting to lead. As the fleet disappeared into the horizon of stars, the words echoed across every communication channel, across every listening world and every frightened enemy stronghold. "Brace yourself. A human warship is incoming." It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a promise. A promise that wherever darkness rose, humanity would rise brighter. Wherever tyranny spread, humans would fight back. And even if the galaxy forgot everything else, it would remember this forever. When humans came, they came with fire in their hearts, unity in their souls, and courage that no force in the universe could ever destroy.